Hello there, and welcome to another of Andre's Artist Profiles. Uh, Today I am celebrating the birthday of somebody who sadly passed within the last 10 years, and very tragically. I believe it was a victim of gun violence, as a matter of fact. And that was Mr. Roger Troutman. Now, what happened is that in the early 80s, very early 80s, in fact in 1980, Roger Troutman, who had headed up a band called Roger and the Human Body, with his brother, whose name was Zapp Troutman, hence the name of this band we're going to be profiling right here, along with Roger's solo work, when he met up with George Clinton, and they recorded this album in 1980, featuring Bootsy Collins and members of P-Funk, on Uncle Jam, but there was some kind of bidding war going on, and the Warner Brothers label offered Roger more money, and this album never came out on Uncle Jam, but it is by default something of a P-Funk album. It sounds very similar to P-Funk's 1979-80 sound, Zapp, and it actually had a song called More Bounce to the Ounce on it, which features Roger singing entirely on a vocoder. Not a auto-tune, an actual vocoder. Okay, I don't know if how many of you remember a vocoder, what that sounded like, but anyway, More Bounce to the Ounce was an icon of 80s music, and this is a great funk album, but More Bounce to the Ounce really began the electro boogie funk sound, mixed with a P-Funk influence, and Roger's strong blues, jazz-oriented playing, okay? So that's the first Zapp album from 1980. Released on Warner Brothers, but made for George Clinton's Uncle Jam label. Roger made a solo album in 1981 called The Many Facets of Roger, which contains some fantastic songs, very much in the style of the first album. And, this could have been a huge beginning for a solo career for Roger Troutman. There's a great song on here called Max Axe. He did a version of I Heard Through the Grapevine. It's just, really good. So Rough, So Tough is on here. It's been remixed so much through hip-hop. So Rough, So Tough. That solo album came out on CD in 2002. Before that, this was very much a collector's item on vinyl. The next Zapp album came out in 1982, and it contained a song called Dance Floor. Like Mothership Connection, this is an album with absolutely no ballads. It's all full-on funk and all full-on vocoder. Fantastic record from 1982. Zapp 2. Zapp 3 came out in 1983 and had a song on it called I Will Make You Dance. This album is not thought of as being as strong as the first two Zapp albums, the Roger solo album, but it's out of print now, as far as I know. So I'm pretty glad that I have it. There's the back of it. My favorite song on here is a song called Heartbreaker. I just like the feel of it. The new Zapp for You came out in 1985. This album has a song called It Doesn't Really Matter, where Roger Troutman actually talks about how James Brown influenced his career. And he does an electronic cover of I Only Had Eyes for You on this album. This album's much more electronic than earlier Zapp albums. Now, a few years ago, Wounded Bird reissued Roger's second solo album, The Saga Continues, from 1985, which, unfortunately, this album came out in 84. Sorry, unfortunately, I don't have The Saga Continues, because Wounded Bird put that album out of print pretty quickly, regrettably, so I hope it comes out again. Roger's third solo album was called Unlimited. Came out in 1987. By this point, Roger was doing more slow jams and ballads, and really not doing as much funk. But there are some up-tempo tunes on that album. Zapp 5 came out 2 years later, in 1989. This particular album is actually a little bit more New Jack hip-hop informed, but it's 89. Everybody was being very informed by that guy, Teddy Riley sound of Bobby Brown and all that. But it's still funk. I mean, basically New Jack is basically, funk played with machines rather than live musicians anyway, up-tempo. But, it's an okay album. A lot of people don't like it, but it takes the sound of New Zapp for You from several years earlier and kind of expands on that. The next album with Roger is the solo album Bridging the Gap from 1992, I believe. And this album, he drops the vocoder and shows that he's really a pretty good singer, actually. And that's not a bad album. Again, very New Jack inspired. This is how I first got into Roger and Zapp. All the greatest hits. A mix of remixes, Zapp, Roger solo material that came out in 1993. I got it when I was part of the BMG Music Club. And I still have it because there's some songs from some of the Roger stuff and remixes that I don't have on the actual albums. Same goes with this. I have Volume 2. And there's a whole history on Roger Troutman that's very interesting and very significant that you all should really read. But that's what I have for Zapp. And I think really they're an underrated group in a lot of ways. Some would say they're overrated, but they're a really important group as far as the development of funk into the 80s. So, happy posthumous birthday to Roger Troutman, and I'll see you next time.